Okay, I'll do my introduction again. So, hi, I'm Ralen. I am currently a pastor, an associate pastor serving in Wichita, Kansas. Before I got the call, I did not know where Wichita, Kansas was. So, and I learned how to spell Wichita. So I'm feeling very proud of myself. I'm currently from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I grew up in Philly. From like birth to 18, that's where I primarily lived. Growing up is a big part of my call story. I say that we did church. So Sundays, like Saturdays, Wednesdays, church was really big in part of my family. Even begrudgingly, when I didn't want to go, we still had to go to church. So that was a little hard because even if like my like parents were sick or whatever, my mom was sick, she would still send my sister and I. Yeah, so I didn't really have a lot of faith and I really didn't like church growing up. I know it's hard to say for a pastor, but it was just when you're forced to do it, it's not something you enjoy. And I held a lot of resentment for God because I was adopted and I thought that God gave my parents didn't love me. I don't know if anybody's adopted here. You go through a lot of emotions, right? So I had amazing parents who raised me and they're beautiful people, but not having my birth parents was a real struggle growing up because I felt as though that I was inadequate, like I wasn't enough, and then in turn got really angry with God. So that also, with all of the different emotions of like finding your faith as a young person and formulating your faith and being forced to do something you didn't want to do, tied into a lot of resentment. It wasn't until I want to say, between like 11 or so that I really understood that, like, okay, I'm gonna just, I have I have so many more years to like sit in this pew. So I might as well make the best of it. So I started like really listening to the sermons and I was like, oh, this Jesus guy isn't so bad, right? And like, okay, so like I wasn't raised by my biological parents, but I was raised by parents who love me and care for me and are constantly there for me. And just started seeing parallels of like the real world life with like the gospels and the stories that like intertwine and met. That I was like, oh, okay, so I'm just an adolescent and I like will hate a lot of stuff, but I'm gonna grow to love things. And then around like 13, I looked at like the pulpit one Sunday and I was like, ooh, I think that's like something I kind of want to do. But I didn't tell anyone because it's weird, right? Like what 13-year-old wants to be a pastor? No one. Like everybody wants to be like doctors and lawyers and firefighters and like a whole bunch of like popular secular jobs. And I'm over here like, wow, I'm a weirdo because I definitely want to be a pastor. So I didn't tell anyone and I did a lot of stuff in the church and I became very active. I started like making my faith make sense to me. And in turn, like it just like kind of built up. So it wasn't until like I was like 18 years old, I set my parents down before college and I was like, hey guys, I want to be a pastor. And I was like nervous of the reaction. And my like dad said something along the lines of, it's about goddamn time. And I was like, well, at least other people are like seeing this, right? And affirming this. So I went off to school. I studied like anthro and soc because I was like studying people and cultures. This will help me like best understand when I hit a parish one day. And then I like studied, I did some like Yagam stuff, like missionary stuff with the church. And then I went to seminary and now I'm here. um and a lot of stuff in between, right? Like trying to find myself and my identity as a college student and trying to be reintroduced because when your parents aren't there telling you to go to church, you don't go to church. And sleeping in was more ideal, but I found like a cool like evening service in the city because I went to school in New York and like went to Lower East Side and like found a cool little like 7 o'clock service that was like fun and geared to like the young folk. So like finding different things really helped formulate and shape. I would say that my call story wasn't just this one thing. It wasn't just this like angsty like young adult or like I guess like child. It has like everyone I've met so far and everything I've done so far helped formulate who I am and help me have my own personal theology. Yeah, so I'm a pastor in one of the widest mainline denominations in the US. It is currently 96% white. That means it's only 2% Black or African American. I say Black because it's the gamut of African and all of that encompassed. So, yeah, it's been challenging, especially in the time in which we live, where racial unjust is so prevalent and the disparities between me and my white counterparts are so prevalent that it's a little hard. Um, so Haley Bay was like, so what's one of the most challenging things, or like, what was something, a time you've experienced social injustice? And I want to say like the majority of my call, but I will tell a story. So I was working as a pastoral associate because I was working in a church as I finished seminary, and I had a parishioner, and I want to say bless his heart to the fullest. I work primarily, if not all of the jobs in churches have been in white churches and white spaces. So I've been one of the very first Black female pastors or Black female pastoral associates. So keep that in mind when I tell this story. So I was serving at a church in predominantly white space, white affluent, a little waspy. And I was doing home visits because pastoral care is one of my spiritual gifts. And with my parishioner, and he calls me the N word. And while I will say it was the first time, it was not. So I had to like suck it up, and I had to put my big girl pants on and still offer love and compassion and just be present with this man, even though he did not care for me, even though my race offended him that I could not change, my female offended him that I could not change. And yeah, that's what he called me. And that was my parishioner, and I had to rise above. And afterwards, I cried a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Like went home and cried. But then I continued to minister to this man. And I didn't do any home visits in between his time because he was like homebound between him transitioning to death. But my last visit, I went to him, and I was like, okay, I gotta be there for him, even though a whole bunch of other things occurred. I had to be there for him. So I sat with him and held his hand as he transitioned and did his funeral. So I think that was like one of the biggest, I think, hurdles for me because it was a personal, right? So like we're here, pastors are called to accompany people and be there for people and walk with people. And sometimes it's really, really hard, especially in spaces where you don't look or act or talk like the people in those spaces. So yeah, I think that, and it was like what, 2 years ago that happened. So it wasn't like it was like back in the day when this occurred. So you see the just different, I guess, complexities of walking as a pastor, especially like a female pastor and a Black female pastor at that, in a lot of these spaces. I feel like I just talked a lot at you guys. My favorite is still, I'll get this today, is like when I'm like interviewing or I'm talking at them like spaces and I'm talking to my white counterparts, there's always a question that pops up like, well, how do you talk to them? Speaking like, how would I talk to white people? And it's after I've already talked and I'm like, I don't know. That's, you know what? I'm gonna have to sit on that and think about that. So I try to make it a little fun because if I don't, I will cry. And Lord knows I don't want to cry. So it is just being a presence, at times being an emotional punching bag, but also trying to educate in the same breath. So it's compassionately walking with someone, but also teaching them. So I try to do that within my sermons. I try to shake up the liturgy a little bit. So it's not just out of the ELW, but it's a plethora of other liturgy books that Augsburg Confession has, like This Far by Faith, which no one knows about, but it's there and it's present and it's used in the African American and Black communities. Different musicians and having different voices. So a lot of my pastoring in these white spaces have been introducing different voices and elevating it, not just the regular like cis male white men that we so often turn to. It's holding up like James Cone in the same breath as like Bonhoeffer. It's like quoting Kelly Brown Douglas, even though she doesn't need to be quoted, but like some people don't know who she is. So I try to be conscious of the fact that while I'm probably the first, I don't want to make it the last. So yeah, that's my story, and I guess I'll stick to it a little bit. Does anybody have any?
Ralen, thank you so much. No, I I just want to recognize how much courage it takes to be you um, in when I wish that it didn't, but it's the fact. And um, I promise we won't ask you how you talk to white people because that's like an extra offense that you shouldn't have to face. Um, and I really appreciate your truth telling in all of this. Um, I was just writing as you were talking because there's so many questions that I want to ask, and I'm sure that other people have them too. Can you remind me? I feel like, did we meet when you were in high school or were you already in college at that point?
I was like a
Do you remember when
freshman
that
in
event?
college. Yeah. So I
Okay,
had to be like a
okay.
freshman in school.
So we did this. I was in the first round of this intern group called Project Connect back in, I want to say 2005. And that year, what's called the Eastern Cluster of Lutheran seminaries. So it was Philadelphia, Gettysburg, and Southern, which is in South Carolina, got this grant from the Lilly Foundation, like the Lilly Corporation. I don't know, they make different stuff, but it's like this really rich company that gives out nonprofit or grants for nonprofits. So Project Connect was this grant that you could apply to through that Eastern cluster of Lutheran seminaries. And Ralen and I were both part of that, but when it started, I sort of stayed with it as the grant grew and as more people were able to receive those grants. And Raylan, did you go to that like discernment retreat, or were you also a Project Connect intern? Did you have one of those internships, or was it that retreat specifically?
Both and. So I was like the last
Okay,
year that they held internships. I interned at like a church in Boston.
cool.
hmm
Okay, so when we met, we were both, at different stages of our discernment process, but I always felt like Raylan had this authentic approach to life and ministry that I wanted to know more about. And that's been the case ever since then. And there's an age gap between us, but that didn't matter. I mean, it doesn't. So I am thankful that you're here today sharing that authenticity of your experience, and you as a child of God who is also a Black woman and a strong Black woman pastor. So my next question is sort of trivial, but I just hope it like opens up some space. You have such great style. I mean, I know your clothes. I like see your office background right now, and it looks like a page out of a magazine. Um, so I just want to ask, for you, I'm wondering, how do faith and fashion come together for you, or how does fashion help you express your faith? Is that something that um, is that something that you can share?
Yeah, I can actually. So like again, I love fashion and I love shoes. I love shoes a little bit, probably too much, guys. But that it just makes me feel good, right? When you like look good, you feel good. And a lot of times people have this certain image of pastors, and I'm like, I'm not gonna fit that mold, right? Like that's just not that's not me. That's never gonna be me. And I like color, I like patterns, I like the newest styles to incorporate in with my clerics. And I think that that's just part of what ministry looks like today. It makes it accessible. And I feel like with clothes, it makes you more relatable. There's been times where I've had like parishioners say, oh, I have that same like blouse, or I have those same shoes or whatever. And we can start off a conversation in that way. I feel like the stoic, all black, like just look like clerical clergy outfit is nice and all, but it's a disconnect. And with fashion, it bridges the gap to the people, because you can have
Mm,
simple styles and you can continue to chat and talk, and it can spark conversation and make you feel and allow you to be warm in this space. So
thank
yeah,
you, Raylan.
of course.
Okay, I have another question, and while you all are thinking of your questions. So was I wanted to just ask, like, why a Lutheran pastor? Did you, the church that you grew up in, was it a Lutheran church, and what specifically um do you appreciate about, I mean, because you had you had the world at your fingertips when you chose this
Mhm.
as your career path, as your call. And so, what about the Lutheran Church really has influenced you? And even while you experience injustice, what is it that keeps you here?
Oh. So I grew up Lutheran, cradled Lutheran. I grew up in a Black Lutheran church. So I actually didn't know it was like white until high school when I did other things. Like that didn't compute to me, because all the other Lutheran churches that we did things with were Black Lutheran churches or African descent Lutheran churches. So I in like Philadelphia, so we were in this like kind of like little like bubble where, oh, okay, um, I love Lutheranism for the grace, right? I feel as though you can come messed up, you can come jacked up, you can come incomplete. You don't have to wear all the right things, know all the right words, but there's grace for that. Like it's literally come as you are. And like Jesus still loves you. God is still present with you. The Holy Spirit is still, she is still wrapping you up. And I love that about Lutheranism. And I think that the core of the matter is like, I can be, like not that great 5 days out of a week. But on that sixth day, when I'm really good, God loves me those 5 days and that sixth day. And I truly resonate with that the most. And it's again, I also love the liturgy, because regardless of what Lutheran church I enter into, where I go, rather it's the East Coast, the Midwest, the West Coast, the ordo and the liturgy is the same, and it feels like home. And I don't care if you're doing the Apostles' Creed or if the Lord's Prayer is a little altered, it's still the same. And I love that.
Thank you so much, Raylan.
Thanks.
And when she mentions the ordo, do you mind if I just explain
Oh,
that
yeah, please
just a
do.
little bit? So ORDO, it stands for the four parts of worship. So gathering, word, meal, sending.
Mhm.
And within that framework, you can change and add and do all of these beautiful, amazing things. But that framework is what gives us sort of our Lutheran understanding of worship, our Lutheran liturgy. Um, and with that framework there, so much can change within it. It doesn't always have to be the same. So it would be fun to sort of explore that. You guys, that should have been my symposium last week. I just realized that a week late. Dang it. We'll have to do that again. Everybody last week, like,
Mhm.
just came to the table, came to the Zoom room with like an idea of what they were going to teach us. And then they had like a few minutes to, it was amazing.
Oh, I love that.
It was made PowerPoint.
Ooh.
like in the time that was allotted in Friday at 5. Oh my gosh, it was so cool. I recorded it. And Rachel's was pretty crappy. I'll just leave it at that. Okay. Thank you so much
Of course.
for that response. That was awesome. Do you guys have questions?
I have
I-
one.
Oh, you go first, Maggie.
Okay. I feel like every time that I talk with people about like their experiences of like um just like instances of like hate crime or lesser,
Mhm.
like how do you keep a calm and level headed, like how do you not like immediately like try and fight people, like it goes against like my nature, like me and my friends in high school, like we'd be like, oh, you want to post up, like I will just like fight you, like you, that's like how we would deal with things, which is not constructive when you're trying to talk with folks who have different experiences from you. And so like it's sometimes it's really hard for me to keep that in mind because like I'm from Chicago, so like you don't pull that in Chicago, like you're gonna get beat up. But in Michigan it's very different. Like there I don't think I've ever seen a black person around my grandma's house, and like that's just like the vibe, and it's just a very different experience. And so like I know that also being a city kid, like it's just weird going into spaces where you're like, oh my God, it's all white people. Like what is going on? And so it's just like how do you respond to, because like obviously different responses between like just general like not knowing, and just like having not experienced, like not been exposed to different things, and then also like coming from a place of hatred, like those are two very different things. But like how, it seems like you dealt with it in a very like good way, and like you can just like go cry about it later, which is like fine, everyone deals with things in their own way, but just like how are you able to like stay present in that moment without like freaking out about it?
I guess like first and foremost, like I don't know, like growing up, it definitely helped because like I, my parents gave me the talk. They said, "This is how you talk. This is how you act. This is how you behave. This is how you protect yourself." So I have that like story and that blueprint kind of that they gave my sister and I. So that's always with me. And then the fear of being labeled an angry Black woman is so prevalent since a lot of the spaces I don't see people who look like me. So I have to like definitely check myself. So I either react in regards to like lovingly, I try to educate, or sometimes guys, I'm petty. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little petty. So and like God knows when God chose me to be God's vessel, I was a little petty deep down inside. So I I would just like flip it, right? So I think one of the biggest things was my name. Pronouncing my name was so hard, my two little syllable name. So it was like this one person who just kept butchering it, kept butchering it. I corrected the first or second time, and then afterwards I called them the wrong name every single time. And it was like very petty of me, but it was very generic. Like, his name was like, no, her name was like Sarah. So I called her like Laura and like Samantha and all of these other wild names. And I knew the person's name. I just chose not to until you can correct, until you can say my name, then I will say your name. So stuff like that, like self-correcting or flipping the question around to then mirror themselves is really good because then it halts them and like they have to take a pause. Or like just statistics. Throwing out some like statistics on them has been helpful at times, or offering resources because a lot of times people don't know what they don't know. A lot of times people are uncomfortable with the other, so they, or it's their first time, like their first experience, so therefore they ask these questions a lot of the times out of ignorance. So just meeting them where they are. Yeah.
And Thank you. So when you say flip the question, I'm wondering if we could just sort of do that together
Mhm.
here. So, so, Pastor Ralen, like, what brought you here today to the Lutheran Church?
I don't know. Let's see. Why are you? I guess I should ask, why are you present?
Oh, because, well, I'm Lutheran and this is my church.
Oh, I guess that's the same for me. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I remember, so we had Pastor Cece Mills with us, and Cece was one of my pastors growing up in Virginia and is now one of the DEMs in North Carolina. But when she came, that was one of the questions that she told us was so jarring. Like when she would enter Lutheran spaces, they're like, when I say they, white people are like, why are you here? And she's like, I'm a freaking Lutheran pastor, get out of my face. No, she didn't say it that way. She said, I turned the question around on them and I'm like, do you see how ignorant that is?
Mhm.
And that was really enlightening for me.
Love CC, by the way.
And how we, yes, yeah. And how we welcome people in general, like especially people of color,
Mhm.
young people who experience isms, older people. Like I don't ask Sue when she comes to a campus ministry event, what brought you here? You know what I mean? That's not part of the narrative. Like, but that's because we know Sue and we know Sue's incredible history with campus ministry. Shout out to Sue being in my position before women could be ordained. But yeah, thank you for, I just think that's such an effective way to deal with people. Flip the question and ask them what they just. So what I hear you saying is that's another. Good cue, Maggie.
Thanks.
I had a question about like transitioning in life, because you talked about how you started out in your hometown and then you moved and went to college and did Yagam and stuff. And I love one community and I love University Lutheran Church, but someday I might not live here anymore. And I have this fear of finding a Lutheran church and liking my church, but not finding the same kind of community or the same kind of space where I can thrive in my faith. And I'm wondering from you if you have any advice about how to stay true to what your faith is for you when you're in a church or community that you're not connected to in the same way, or it takes time to be connected to. So I struggled with that growing up. My church was great and it was Lutheran, but I didn't have a community, and it was hard for me to learn exactly what I wanted to believe in.
Yeah, no, it is difficult. And I will say that each space you enter into, each church will have its own flavor, and it'll be so different from what you used to, the church that you previously left. And I think it's just being holding that space to be authentic, right? So you can't take those preconceived notions or things that worked in that church and bring it to that space. You have to respect its own flavor, its own composition, and then just find things within that composition, within that church that you really resonate with. Because a lot of the times we get so fixated on this is who I am as a person and this is what I like, that we close ourselves off to finding things that are like new gifts and new spiritual growths and growing edges that we have, right? So I think entering into new spaces just is always being open. It's always trying to find the, I like to say, the sacred cow. It's a very churchy word. The thing that brings them together, the thing that makes them who they are, and holding that and honoring that. And from there, you're able to see why other people are in that space, and you guys can connect that way. But I also want to acknowledge that it's very, very hard. And those preconceived notions and those expectations definitely creep in, but we have to do a lot of self-talk of, is that language something that's reflective here and that's something that's true, or is it something that I'm projecting?
Thank you.
Of course.
Are there ever instances, or I guess people too, that push you back towards that resentment you felt for God when you were younger? I guess especially when it comes to racial injustice.
I think there's moments where I get frustrated, but I also have to like check my own self and be like, why am I frustrated? Like I have to break down the scenario, the situation. I have to sit with it, right? So a lot of the times I will be if I'm in that like backed into a corner, I don't listen, I react right away. And I think I have to always pause for a moment of pause to be like, why is this making me feel this way? Where is this coming from and what's triggering it? Because a lot of times I have to realize that, is this person being harmful or hateful, or are they just not knowing? And then other times it's like, well, I don't really care, and I just have to like do a little self-care and check out, and that's okay, and step away and give myself some grace and give myself love and time to just be who I need to be in that moment. And each time it's different. And each time, sometimes I'll mess up and sometimes I will get a little frustrated and angry. But I also realize that my words have power and that my position has power. And that, like, if I turn hate with hate, that unfortunately colors them for all the pastors that they interact with all the Black female pastors they interact with going forward. And I don't want to do that.
That seems like a lot to carry.
Yeah, I think so. But then I think that when you're a person of color, you always have that sort of like, I need to speak for you're always like propelled into that. When you have an ism or like a box that you check that's not the cis white male or female, you have to speak, regardless if you're like a part of a person of color or the LGBTQIA plus community. It's the eyes looking at you, but without eyes looking at you. It's there.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Thanks. Um, so Raylan, congregations or pastors care for congregations, and congregations are supposed to care for their pastors also.
Mhm.
Could you share with us either things that congregations have done to provide you support and care that were especially helpful, or things that you wish that they had done?
Uh, I think for different times for congregations, they'll like they'll step up, right? I've seen like I've been a part of beautiful congregations where I don't know, Black History Month, it's very busy for me. It's a thing. But they're like, you know what, Pastor, you sit down. We got this. You know what I mean? Or there'll be a parishioner that says, you know what, I can take this. I can take this role on. And I think those are the most like special moments because like you see who I am and you know I'll do it, but like you also know that I don't need to and that you're more capable of being able to be that voice, of combating that, or a number of things. And I think that congregations will surprise you and people will surprise you. And I'm often surprised. And I welcome those little moments of surprise. I really do.
Where did you serve during your Yagam experience? And I asked that question knowing a little bit about it, but also knowing that some of our students have considered that it's been canceled, well, last year with COVID, and I believe this year
Yeah.
too. But that doesn't rule out future opportunities for it. So you could speak to that. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
I served in Jerusalem in the West Bank. I lived in a Palestinian neighborhood in Jerusalem, right next to a Jewish neighborhood. So I was in a community called Behanina. And yeah, I served there for a little like a year or so. And it's a smaller cohort, so it was me and five other people. So I got to accompany the Palestinian people who are Arab, non-Jewish people, as they lived under occupation, and what that looked like, while acknowledging there's both narratives and there's both rights and there's both wrongs, but seeing what checkpoints look like and how you live, but also having the ability to have a blue passport but not being labeled as an American was a part of my experience. Yeah.
And for those who just haven't heard about that program, it's an ELCA program called Young Adults
Mhm.
in Global Mission, for Global,
Yep.
but
In
in
Global Mission,
Global
yeah.
Mission.
So it's catered to like college age to like, what's the cutoff for the ELCA? 29, under 30. So it's for, and it caters to a whole bunch of different countries. So you have Jerusalem in the West Bank, you have Cambodia, you have, oh gosh, Rwanda. So there's different countries throughout that we partner with, and it's basically mission work. And you are not converting people and telling them about holding your Bible and telling them about Jesus Christ, their Lord and Savior. You're accompanying these people, and you are like immersing yourself in the culture. So you're not standing out looking in and taking photos, but you're walking along the people regardless of what their life looks like.
And just when in your life did you do that Yagamir?
So it was between seminary and college. So I just graduated college. So I was like 22, 23. Mm-hmm. So I
Are you
was really,
glad you did it?
yeah, I am. I'm glad I did it because it really gave me a new perspective of what like it looked like to travel as an American, but a Black American, and very much a polarized community. And it also gave me the ability to find faith in a culture you don't speak the language. And I don't know, my Arabic is real, it's a little spotty, y'all. It's a little spotty, that it's, you have to find faith, right? So, and it did strengthen it because I'm seeing like checkpoints. I'm seeing at a point we had to keep our bag, a bag with our like clothes and stuff, just in case we had to leave, because we went in a tumultuous time. There were a lot of conflicts, and it's so layered there. And there was night curfews. We couldn't leave at nighttime because of the conflicts, because of the the stones being thrown at the soldiers, and a number of things, and the tear gas, that it was really hard. And like, how do you find God in spaces of really brokenness? Um, so yeah, I'm really, all to say, I'm glad I did it. It's a beautiful program. I'm a huge proponent of it.
I was accepted last year, but unfortunately COVID
Oh, yeah.
hit.
Other questions for Raylan? Or Pastor Raylan, any questions you have for our students?
Yeah. Have you been able to carve out time for your spiritual growth, regardless if that's going to church or listening to a podcast or like reading your Bible? Like, what's giving you life right now in your spirituality?
Right now for me it's our centering prayer. It really is. Like that came at we have centering prayer. It started a couple weeks ago every Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning. And it came right at the perfect time for me. Like my classes were overwhelming me a little bit, then it started, and the it's been a constant, that has really helped me in my faith.
Okay.
I have the good fortune of working for this church in a variety of creative projects, and so I encounter the Bible without trying too much. I have friends who invite me to do like devotions or things with them, which is great, but I get a really big dose doing the things that I do, which I really love to do. And so that's definitely a big thing for me is just Bible study in general.
This year in particular, or this semester too, I was at my home in Ohio last semester. Now I'm back on campus. I've really enjoyed having a lot of conversations with my friends outside of one community about religion, because I never had that in high school. People just didn't want to talk about religion. And the people I talk most to it about are former Catholics, which is really interesting to just discuss what their beliefs are and then what I believe, and really makes me question like what questions I have. Not necessarily doubts, but I just love hearing from them, like, oh, I've never even thought about that before. Like, how do I see that in my faith? And then for me as well, going along with that, when I started college too, Maggie and Andrea were the first people I really met in school through another program we did. And I'm still shocked today that like we met at the perfect time, because I never knew anybody who was like ELCA Lutheran who was just like proud of it. Like people were never like not proud of it, I guess, but they didn't just like openly share it. And to know people right away who were the same religion as me, like I was like, geez, I already have buddies like in the same religion. And it's just been amazing to like be a part of this ministry throughout college, because I never had that growing up, and it's been really helpful for me.
Rachel, you know exactly what I'm thinking of. I think that the reason why that came up was one of the activities that we did during this week. Before I came to college, I did like a lot of church stuff, and so I was like really into my spirituality. The last year has been a little bit tougher. We're working on that. But we did this activity where it was like narrowing down your identities, and I think that I had like sexuality, gender, and religion, and it was someone else had to like remove one, and I basically just yelled, "You yeeted my religion." The whole everyone was like, "What is going on?" So that was the way that we met each other. Like just some background on that. But I think that this year, one of the things, I actually met with my therapist on Tuesday, Melissa, woohoo. And just kind of like thinking about how I can be more like strategic in the way that I like am taking care of myself. Because I think that that's something that has been a lot harder during the pandemic because it doesn't come as easily to me. And so trying to be like conscious in that, I think is one of the ways that I did really well, like senior year of high school and most of freshman year of college. And I really like I'm not able to do it as like passively as I did before. And so it's something that I'm going to try and be more. I mean, it took me an entire year to be like, I need to like work on this directly, but we're getting there.
You just reminded me, like doing a Friday at 5 on the variety of self-care practices that people may be interested in, from spiritual direction to knitting to running to like all of these things. We should talk about that. So let's do that.
Self-care is important, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, what you said struck me because, so for folks that don't know, I didn't go to MSU undergrad. I did a master's degree, but at undergrad I was so surprised by the number of conversations I had with people about spirituality and religion. Like I had so many, and I just never expected it going to college. And mostly it was just sort of people wondering and just sort of not quite knowing what they believe and wanting to talk to people about it. A big struggle I had though in college was I went to a small college with one campus ministry that was just very unfriendly. I found them, it's the nicest word I can come up with, but just very sort of strict and exclusionary. And I just really struggled to hang out with them. And so it was hard. I took people to church. That's like something I did, but there really wasn't something like the setting that we're in right here. And so I'm thankful to be here now, and I'm thankful that it's been a blessing to y'all. And but I still lament that looking back. Like I still feel upset about that because, you know, church was a big deal for me up till through high school, and then college I just never found anyone that was into church like I was, like all throughout college. You know, I met Catholics and I met some really fundamental sorts of people, but not much else. And so it just was really, really tough for me. And it's kind of funny because the group on campus there, they thought I was a heretic, you know, they, and it's funny because in a space like this, I think I might be perceived more as like, oh, that dude that loves to do Bible study and, you know, is eating up the church stuff. But like, I was seen as sort of this like weird, like he doesn't believe the right things in the right way kind of dude back then. And it's really funny. But yeah, I'm kind of
I want to
rambling.
encourage everybody, like, you don't have to become a pastor in a campus ministry setting specific to be part of that wherever you end up. You know, Rachel, you kind of pointed to that with your sharing, like wherever you go from here, you can carry this community and nurture and sustain, whether it's like youth type Christian community or campus Christian communities. You can continue to plug in knowing how much. I mean, that's why I wanted to be a campus pastor, is because I knew how much campus ministry meant to me and how positively my life and then call had been impacted by it. So definitely. Well, I am conscious of our time. If there are remaining questions, Pastor Ralen, are you open if folks want to send you a message or email or anything like that?
Yeah, should I put my
Awesome.
email in the little box?
That would be helpful. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And before we wrap up and pray together, Vicki is here to share with us about the core training that's coming up. So I'd like to invite you to do that now.
Yeah, thank you. So we know that education is essential to us in our journey to become anti-racist. And there's lots of books and blogs and other resources that we can utilize. But one resource that I found to be very helpful is a workshop called Understanding Racism. And I'd like to invite you all to participate in the next workshop that's going to be delivered online April 9th and 10th. The workshop's hosted by University Lutheran Church and the Lansing area Congregations Organizing for Racial Reconciliation. So that's what CORE is, Congregations Organizing for Racial Reconciliation. The workshop's going to be led by facilitators from the CORE organization that's based in Grand Rapids. And the purpose of this Understanding Racism workshop is to, one, explore systemic racism from a biblical perspective. Number two, to understand the damage of racialization to white people and to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And three, to begin to work toward individual, institutional, and systemic transformation that will lead to the building of the beloved community. The workshop uses presentations, there's small groups, there's videos. And the people that attend the workshop can then caucus with others who've attended. These caucuses, where white people talk to other whites and people of color talk with other people of color, are held on a bi-monthly, every other month voluntary basis. The caucuses, and I've attended two so far since I went to the training. The last one started with a discussion of a current topic, like the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. And then with a reflection of, in this case, it was think about a time when you realized that you were aware of race and share what you're comfortable describing about that. So it gives me an opportunity to hear other people's experiences and how they describe and talk about them, and to voice my own perspective and to give and receive feedback. And you don't get that by reading books and blogs or listening to podcasts and watching videos. Part of our work to become anti-racist is to learn how to give and receive feedback and correction. I know I need that. I also need to build my understanding of how and what I think. So this workshop and the follow-up caucuses provide a safe space for doing that from a Christian perspective. So the workshop's on April 9th and 10th, which is a Friday and Saturday. It goes from 9 a.m. to noon and then 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. with breaks, lots of breaks in there. You have to attend the entire session, and campus ministry will pick up the registration fee. So when you register, you can choose the pay later option and we'll get the registration paid for you. So I'll put the registration in the chat, the link for it. Does anybody have any questions? I hope you're interested in attending.
Do you need to be a member or just part of campus ministry for
Yeah,
the?
you don't have to be a member of ULC. You can just be part of campus ministry is fine. Yeah. In fact, if you have friends that you'd like to invite to it that are interested in learning from a Christian perspective, because there are, I mean, there's Bible verses with it, and we talk about what God's expectations are for us and that type of thing. So let them know that.
And Vicki, I'm just thinking about attendance. It's just a really quick question. Can you split a registration? So say like I don't have class in the morning, but my friend does, and then vice versa in the afternoon. Could I attend in the morning and my friend in the afternoon, or is that not
Yeah,
the
I
way
think
it
that
works?
would,
And then we could attend together on Saturday, maybe?
well, I think it really builds on itself. So that's why they want people to attend the whole thing, is because that way it uses a analyzing racism from a kind of, it's like a tree, the roots, the trunk, the branches, the leaves, and the fruit. And so it starts with the root, and it kind of builds that through the workshop. So that's why they want you to attend the entire thing.
Thank you.